I didn't know all our music today, and that song would be all about grace, because that's the point of the scripture we're going to look at today as we continue with the with the Sermon on the Mount, not the 23rd Psalm, the Sermon on the Mount. As we continue with that, the grace is really the central piece of this issue of the test that God presents to us. You know, this is a time of year, excuse me, I don't want to trip over some of this stuff. I didn't die on the ladder. I don't want to die on a cello stand there. You know, this is the time of year when you are thinking about a lot of tests. I know you've probably got one or two this week, or maybe three, and they're going to start coming because this is when they all pile up at the end of the semester, and that's part of why we only take chapel for 10 weeks, because these last few weeks of the semester want you to be fully focused on that. But you know, there's this question that American higher education students tend to ask: will this be on the test when you're sitting in a class? Because we have taught a culture and society to study for the test. And instead of to study to learn the material, we have taught all of us to learn how to study for the exam. It's not your fault that you asked the question, will this be on the test? Because that's how the system's set up. The system is set up for testing from the very beginning time that you went into kindergarten all the way through to be focused around the test rather than around the learning. And if I had a dream for all of education, not just for higher education, but for all of education, it would be that there would be no tests and there would be no grades. That's how I'd love to run education if possible. You know, in Finland they say we prepare children to learn how to learn, not how to take tests. But it takes a complete revolution of the learning system in order to not make tests central to what we do. And what we are looking to do in testing is making us look at the shallow end of learning rather than the deep end of learning. Internalizing those ideas is what we're wanting to do. So tests keep making us look at this shallow way of kind of doing what we need to in order to do well on a test, but doesn't really bring about the transformation learning that is important. And you see that through the process of education. You know, when you're in elementary school, you're learning skills. Now, I don't know when you went to elementary school. When I went to elementary school, we had a spelling test every Friday. And that was a big deal at my house. Because at my house, my mother had a rule. And if you got 100 on the spelling test, I could watch one television show the following week. One, that was it. And I'd always pick an hour-long show because I'm not wasting my 100 on a half-hour show. And so I could watch one show if I got 100 on the test. Well, in elementary school, you're learning skills like that. So when you go on to high school, you're learning facts. You're learning all the facts of the bigger process of whatever the discipline is. But then when you get to college, you're learning ideas. And that's the change we're helping you to make here compared to what you have in high school. We want you to learn about the ideas around the discipline. And then when you get to master's degree, that's when you begin to integrate those ideas across disciplines and throughout disciplines in a different way. And then when you get to a doctoral level program, that's really where you begin this transformational, deep learning that just becomes so much a part of you. And that is in our educational system in America, takes that much to do because we start with this dependency on tests. But that's the kind of learning that has to happen. I'll give you an example of that. Some of you know my wife, and I'm sorry she couldn't teach this semester. She had a terrible concussion this summer. She started to teach, and she just, with the headaches, couldn't do it, so had to back up. But she can't wait to get back in the spring. So if you're in a class in the spring, she will be ready to go. We pray. But she did her PhD in English at the University of Maryland. And at the University of Maryland, there were three parts to the degree. First, you had to take a certain number of courses. There really weren't a lot of courses, maybe 12 courses. And then you had to pass comprehensive exams, and then you had to write a dissertation. Those were the three portions of the deal. Well, her comprehensive exams, they had to pick three areas of study and be tested on that in any way that the department wanted to test. They didn't tell you what was going to be on the test. They didn't tell you what books they were going to cover. They didn't tell you what material they were going to cover. So she took early American literature, post-Civil War, and British literature. Those were her three areas. And she went away to study for 6 months for each one of those exams. She created dozens of notebooks of notes and materials and internalized that material so much that when she was able to take the exam, having no idea what was on it other than it was going to be about British literature, 3 questions, make or break, that she could do that. And I think she was the only one in the history of the University of Maryland who passed all 3 in a row. You got 6 chances to pass 3. That's the kind of learning of transformation that overwhelms us. And so that's what really Jesus calls us to in the Sermon on the Mount, in a passage that you will know and be familiar with. And what he's doing is giving a contrast to the kind of testing religion that had gone on before. You see, the Old Testament has 613 laws. 365 of those are negative commands, and 248 of those are positive commands. And these were watched over by what's called the scribes and Pharisees. So these were the religious leaders. They didn't have a pastor. This is the equivalent of that. Scribes and Pharisees, and they would examine these laws from the Old Testament, and they would write commentary about them. And then, like religious people tend to do, they go, well, you don't really do it that way, you do it this way instead. And then you'd branch off, one group would want to do it this way, and another group, and that other group would say, well, you're not doing it right, you ought to do it this way. And so this thing turned into thousands and thousands of mutations of the ways to do it best and to learn to follow. And Jesus said, I'm going to give you a whole better way. It's not about a test of a whole bunch of things to memorize. It's not about cramming for how to do the Christian life. It's not trying to figure out, well, I can't remember what I learned about how to do in this situation. That's not it. Jesus instead gives us one golden rule that sets the parameters for all how we live as Christians. He says, so in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. This sums up the law and the prophets. All 600 plus of those laws is all summed up in this one. There's no cramming for the test. There's no memorizing the structure. There's no having to recall, what do I do here and what do I do here and how does this work here? No, it's all summed up in this one familiar passage you know well, the Golden Rule. Do to others what you would have them do to you. And that sums up everything, is what he's talking about here. And so, one simple golden rule gives us the answer to 10,000 complex situations. Pretty remarkable that Jesus would say everything that the Old Testament teaches, all the guidance that was given, because you were separated from God during those times, because I am restoring you to God, you can summarize that all in one simple understanding. Just do to others as you would have them do to you. Well, you know, we tend to live life and we want it to be pretty black and white. If this happens, I'm going to do this. If this happens, I should do this. You know, life doesn't really work that way. Life is more often gray than it is black and white. And I have a hint for you. The older you get, the grayer it gets. And everybody who's older will tell you that. The things that were simple at the beginning are not as simple as life goes on. You discover that with age. So Jesus taught us, don't to memorize for the test. Don't memorize the 613 laws. Don't memorize all the permutations and thousands of combinations of how to implement those laws. Instead, just do this one thing, this one principle, because it works every single time. The gospel is not a set of rules, it's a gift that awakens a spirit in us that brings about transformation. That's what the gospel is. And it really comes back to that spirit of the Beatitudes. We worked hard to get up that ladder of fulfillment, and now Jesus is saying, do to others what you'd have them to do to you, which means you got up the ladder, help somebody else up in the same way. And do the things that help them climb that ladder of fulfillment just as you got up the ladder of fulfillment. And so we see this in this golden rule. Those Beatitudes of the ladder of fulfillment starts with need God. Well, you know, a lot of people can't admit that they need God or need anybody. They think they've got to make it in life on their own. But when you treat them with kindness and care and interest in their life in the same way you would want to be treated, you can help them get up on that first rung of the ladder. Maybe it's that they can't get to the second rung because it can't be broken by sin, because they can't face their sin. Maybe things have happened in their life early on that weren't their fault, but in order to deal with the difficulty of that and the stress of that and the trauma of that, they do other things to act out, and those sins make their life more complex, and they don't realize they're doing it, and they need somebody who will treat them in a way that God would treat them in order to help them up the next rung of the ladder. Or maybe it's they can't get to the step of being humble. You know, there are a lot of people in life who think the only way I'm going to get forward is to fight. I'm going to fight you on everything. I'm going to fight for what I get. I'm going to fight for my rights because my rights are more important than anything, because they've learned out of a culture that if you don't fight, you don't make it. And instead, Jesus is calling us to humility. And the only way they're going to learn humility is if somebody walks alongside them and treats them in the way that you want to be treated, to understand you are broken before God. Well, maybe it's they can't get up the ladder to hunger and thirst for righteousness because they always want to be right. They don't want to listen to anybody else. They just want to beat their position into you and make everybody respond to their way. And in doing so, they're not hearing God's way. And again, you can be there in faithfulness and kindness and understanding because you've already been up the ladder of success. And then you go up the rest of the steps of the ladder, and they almost always come down to a problem with selfishness. They can't be merciful to others because they're selfish. They can't be pure in heart because they're selfish. They can't be peacemakers because they're selfish. And you can be the person who is there to do to them not what they're expecting, but do to them as you wish someone would do to you. Jesus says that's the model. That's the only thing that's on the test. This thing's pretty simple. At the same time, it's really complex because this one idea works in every single situation. One simple golden rule gives us the answer to 10,000 complex situations. Well, you know, this is not a transactional thing. You know, some businesses say, well, I'm going to treat everybody right. I'm going to treat everybody like I want to be treated because then I'll have better customers. They'll be more loyal. No, that's not what we're talking about. That's fine for business, but that's not what we're talking about. Some people say, well, I'm going to follow that legalistically. Well, it doesn't really work legalistically. I mean, a child can't do for their parents what they wish they would do for them, to have ice cream at every meal. Or a doctor and a patient relationship, or a teacher and a student relationship. In unequal relationships, it doesn't hold up in the same way if you're legalistic about it, and that's not what Jesus is asking us to do. Instead, he's asking us to use our imagination and our understanding to put ourselves in the place of others, to see what they need, where their heart is, where they're hurting, and to help lift them up in doing that. And that's called empathy. You know the difference between sympathy and empathy? It's a gigantic difference. Sympathy is, I feel really sorry that this thing has happened to you, and I'm really sorry you're struggling with that. I'm sorry for that. Empathy is, I hurt in the same way you hurt because I take on those same pains and understanding, and I can get inside your spirit to understand and help carry that with you. Empathy requires love. The golden rule is impossible without Christian love. A lot of people try it. Golden rule comes up in a lot of different religions. Golden rule comes up in a lot of slogans and stuff in different forms. Christ was the only one who put it in a positive position. Every other religion puts it in a negative position. But in golden rule, to really live it out and to really do for others what you would have them do for you because of what Christ has done for you, not because what others mistreated you so I can afford to get away with that. Some know what Christ has done for you, you're going to do it for others, and that's not a love we have on our own. We need the wisdom and we need the strength of God to love in that kind of a way. And Jesus said, this is the only thing on the test. This is the test of life. Don't worry about the 600 and some rules to follow. Don't worry about the thousands of permutations of people who tell you how to be a Christian and how to be a Christian in this situation or that situation. And if you were a real Christian, you'd do this or that or the other. No. Jesus says it comes down to one thing. Do to others what you would wish they would do to you. And that takes love that only comes from God. It's impossible otherwise. So when we find that level of love, what happens? Jesus says, so in everything, not in some things, in everything, do for others what you would have them do for you. Well, there's some outcomes. I just want to give you 5 of them real quick. The first is this: you won't disappoint God. You won't disappoint God. Now, there's nothing you can do to make God love you no more. We've talked about that. So you're not earning your way to heaven. You're not earning your way into God's good graces. You're not getting a higher notch on the totem pole of God's rewards, where He gives trophies out. It's not how it works. No, what we're doing here is not disappointing God because we love God so much. It's kind of like your parents. If you love your parents, you want to do things that honor them in the way that they want it done because you love them. Not because you always think it's a way you understand how to do it, but you know that that expresses your love for them. How we respond to others is how we love God. Do you hear that? How we respond to others is how we love God. So we don't disappoint God when we follow the golden rule. Secondly, we will be loved and respected if we follow the golden rule. No, you won't win every time, but that's not what life's about. No, somebody may take advantage of you. So what? What you'll be is a person of integrity. What you'll be is a person who will be respected. What you'll be is a person who is admired over time, and you will be loved and you will be respected because you live out this golden rule in a consistent way. We just had one of our board members die a couple of weeks ago, and I was privileged to do his eulogy. And he was a general contractor who built many of the buildings on the campus, the last 7 big buildings he built, including that parking garage. And we're going to have to finish it without him. But Mike Harrell was a remarkable guy, and one of the remarkable things about him is his general contractor, which is a tough business, which can be a mean business, which can be an aggressive and nasty business at times. Mike was never that way. He always treated people how he wanted to be treated. And at his funeral, there were hundreds of people who had worked with him, who competed against him in projects, who had built buildings with him, who loved Mike Harrell because he really was a golden rule person. And in the end of his life, you saw that love and respect that he had earned. Well, the third outcome of living the golden rule is it brings healing and hope to others. You know, there's so many hurting people right in a row where you're sitting today. I can guarantee you. There's so many hurting people. And so often, hurting people lash out. So often, hurting people feel like they got to fight. So often, hurting people feel like they got to act out. Just love them. Just care for them. Just treat them in the way that you would want to be treated. And in doing so, you honor God and bring healing and hope to their life. No, it's not going to come in one instant transformation just because you're nice and do the proper thing one day. Then I can say, well, I'm going to be all different. No, but over time, let God work. You do your part, let God do the rest of it. Well, the fourth thing that comes out of living the golden rule is you spare yourself more grief. You know, a lot of the problems we have in life are self-inflicted wounds. We struggle with stuff because of stuff we've done. We've created it. We lashed out at somebody. We cut the corners on something. We lied about something. We have these self-inflicted wounds, and then we go around trying to clean up after them, and a lot of the complexity of our life is stuff that we've created ourselves. Well, if you live by the golden rule, most of that stuff starts to go away. Because when you treat others the way you wish you would be treated, you don't have those kinds of self-inflicted wounds that hurt you. That's why Jesus said there's one rule, not 600 of them. And then one more. It'll diffuse tensions in any relationship. Relationships can very easily develop tensions. Be the one who makes it better. Don't be the one who makes it worse. When the tensions rise, you be the one who's calm. When the tensions rise, you be the one who treats others the way that you wish they were treating you. When somebody's upset at you, treat them in the way you wish they were treating you instead of the way they are treating you. Boy, this golden rule is pretty amazing. Because in all the complexity of what we see across how to live for God in the Old Testament, because God was not present in that way, in that same way, and until Jesus came, the rules didn't change. And then Jesus said, no, it's all summed up in this one thing. Do for others what you wish they would do for you. That's all of the law and the prophets right there. And do it in everything. Let's pray together. Lord, help us to not just hear your teaching, but to do it. Because as you tell us in our verse of the year, that's what makes us wise. So pray that together for our benediction today. No eye has seen, no ears heard, no mind has conceived what God has prepared for those who love him and follow the golden rule. God bless. Have a good day.